Haley, it is so wonderful to have you with us because you have been such a strong advocate as women continue this journey in professional sports. And I'd love you to share with our audience your journey into advocating for women's canoeing as an Olympic sport and what brought you there.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. And as a 14-year-old girl, I was getting into kayaking, and then an opportunity opened up where I could get into canoeing. And uh, I really started thinking, okay, there's an opportunity for maybe women's canoeing to go to the Olympics. But at that time, there was 3 categories that were available for men and 1 for women.
Wow.
And uh, it just became apparent as I started getting onto the provincial team and then the national team and then going to the world championships and the World Cups that we were allowed to compete at that level, but they weren't
Hmm.
really putting it on their agenda to make it into the Olympics. So, really, what happened was through my passion of paddling and through just really wanting to be able to hopefully call myself an Olympian one day, I band together with a band of female canoeists across the world, and this was before, Facebook was really prevalent and direct messaging and video calls like this were not a thing, and we were calling each other on long distance
What
across
what
the
time
world.
frame was this? Like what years was this?
I was around 16 years old when that started,
Wow.
so oh my goodness, I'd have to think about the actual time frame of what that is, but, years are not something that sticks in my head easily, but, it was definitely a time when I was younger and had no idea what I was doing, but what I did
Hmm.
know is that and what I felt so true in my heart and what I knew so deeply is that we had a right to go to the Olympics and
Right.
we had an opportunity to hopefully push for that and it became, so much bigger than me and so much bigger than just my passion for the sport, but it also became this huge gender equality fight
Hmm.
and essentially breaking the glass ceiling.
It's interesting how, that there's been a consistent fight for gender equality in sports. And, you shared to fight for this. So there was actually like pushback, right? You faced resistance in actually getting it included in the Olympics. Can you unpack what some of that pushback actually looked like and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think for me it was that there's always going to be these opportunities that
Hmm.
we can open up and always look at how there can be that equality, but I think the pushback comes from a lot of different areas. For us specifically within women's canoeing, we were told that there just wasn't enough women competing,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that there just wasn't enough depth in the sport, and uh, we were like, "Well, yeah, because you haven't provided us equal funding opportunities,
Right.
equal competing opportunities." I mean, once your sport makes the Olympics, Sport Canada, or different sport organizations across the world recognize you as an Olympic sport, then there's a huge funding pathway that opens up for you. But if you're not an
Hmm.
Olympic sport, it's almost impossible to get funding other than finding your own sponsors and doing fundraisers, and then if you go into the more professional side of things like mountain biking or anything like that, but it really comes down to you need to be able to give that opportunity and know that it's going to take time to build. And I mean, we had totally crazy, outlandish things like um, women's places in a kitchen, and
Wow.
like it could hinder your ability to have children. These were
Of
people that
course.
were saying this at a high level in Canoe Solemn and not in Canoe Solemn, but in Canoe Sprint more. But it was women's canoeing in general, and we were just like, holy Toledo, like
Yeah.
this is not something that should be said at this time or age, and there's science that it disproves that that doesn't happen, but, um, it
Just as
just became us having to put that truth forward and show that, we are ready and that there is depth, and you just have to put a chance on there being gender equality.
you hit a bit on the funding, which is obviously really important to us at the Pay Equity Commission, and the issue of access to funding. Number one, is you raised, but then also pay equity and female athletes. So, what do you see today as the biggest hurdles for female athletes striving for pay equity in their sports?
I think that I think about my journey and how I had to basically raise anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 a year. And I
Wow.
actually mentor a lot of athletes now that are in similar positions. And I think that
Hmm.
what we are seeing is that women's soccer, women's basketball, uh, these more professional league sports are selling out, which is amazing. And we have
Yeah.
these, and the fact that we have these leagues, that they're sponsorable properties, that we have not only the ability for someone to go watch them in an arena, but young girls to go watch these girls in arenas and dream of being one of those people one day. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is that they don't have to
Hmm.
see men in these arenas and think about, oh, like, I'd love to be an NHL player. Well, you can't, because there's no
Yeah.
league for you, right? So, but I think the biggest hurdle that we have is that there's still more opportunity in men's sport than there is in women's sport. Uh,
Hmm.
we just had in mountain biking Rampage, which is a huge Red Bull Rampage, which is desert mountain biking. For the first time, women competed ever. And it
Wow.
wasn't because they didn't want to compete. It wasn't because they weren't ready. It's because Red Bull didn't give them a category until this year.
Wow.
And so, it still comes down to, just because there is something awesome out there doesn't mean that there's always going to be a women's category. So I think that everything we do, every sport opportunity, we need to create that category, and then the funding will come with it, and the sponsorship opportunities.
Uh, that's a really great point you made earlier about saying, just it becomes down like a supply and demand question, basically,
Hmm.
right? Because critics often say that, well, women's sports generate less revenue, so pay disparities are justified, or, not even offering a women's category is justified because it's just not supply and demand. Now, how do you counter that argument? Because surely, and we've seen, as you've pointed out, women's NBA, women's hockey, soccer, we've seen that there's a demand to watch women's sports. So how do you counter this argument?
It's funny, even hearing you say that, I just realized that we said NBA, and it's actually WNBA.
WNBA. Oh my God. See, it's
WHL,
just
and
in our
even
brains.
it's
It's in our
ingrained in our
brains.
brains. Yeah. So the NBA is the basketball league,
Men's league. Yeah.
men's league, right? But and it's I think that what we need to continue to do is well, there's a statistic that I think 1 in 4 females at the age of 14 leave sport. And there's so many reasons. It's
Hmm.
not it's something that's feminine, or
Mm.
there's eating things going on there. There's a lot of stuff there. But I think a big thing that's still encouraged is that it's not encouraged for females to do sport. And it's not something that, when a young boy is athletic, they're like, oh, wow, he's going to be a great athlete. When a young girl
Sure.
is athletic, that's not usually the narrative that's coming. So I think that closing this gap comes down to that grassroots level of how we speak about sport. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think, coming back to the specific side of pay, uh, like, you just have to create the opportunity, and people will come. And the
Right.
NBA was not built overnight, and we can't expect that the WNBA is going to be the same. So we have to give it a little bit of time, and give it a little bit of time to build, but know that it is a huge sponsorable property, and a very competitive game, and
Hmm.
very exciting to watch.